Welcome to EIPIP Meeting 28. I'm Pooja Ranjan. The first item on the agenda is progress on EIP GitHub repo action bar. So Alita Moore from the ECH team is working on the EIP GitHub repo, and I suppose she also created a pull request to share this bot for review with the EIP editors. The pull request number is 3351. If there is any other updates on the progress and concerns with the bot that anyone would like to share any relevance of this effort, feel free to share because I don't see Alita here, but I have seen some comments left by EIP editors on the issue.
I heard it's almost done, but I haven't looked at the code myself.
I haven't gone through the code in depth because we're trying to decide where it should properly live, and I am kind of asking for it to be moved to its own separate repository, and it's just called from EIP repository to do the action. So that's being worked out at the moment.
Is that how GitHub Action works? Because usually you put the script in the repository in a separate folder that's hidden.
I mean, most GitHub actions that people use are, public actions in a separate repo, and you only add it to your YAML file in the GitHub workflow folder. So I assume that it should be pretty straightforward to just have another repository, at least from what I've seen in the docs for the actions. It seems like it has a pretty straightforward method for referring to an action by a user in a repository name.
Oh, okay.
Brent, I believe you also had some questions on this.
Yeah, you guys have been talking about it. It's more related to mine, so I'll just wait till we get to my item and I'll do it all at once.
Sure, no problem. The next item on the agenda is network upgrade process review. So there were some questions, comments on the network upgrade process in the All Core Dev Discord channel last week that surfaced with respect to EIP 2315. Regardless of the decision taking for that proposal, I want to address some comments that was specifically related to the network upgrade process that we came up with recently. So as per my understanding, it was mainly related to two things. Number one, many people are still not aware of the process. And number two, the network upgrade process could be modified to enforce the review status, that is a fairly new status, to be a mandatory status at or before it is CFI approved. So for the first point, like people are not aware, I think we need to be a little more vocal about that and create more awareness about the new process and encourage authors of at least core EIPs to follow the process. As far as point number two is there, I'm proposing some changes to the current process. There is a link in the agenda that people can follow. I have been meaning to propose this earlier, but I believe it's not too late to start now as well. I came up with these suggestions based on some conversation with Micah at different places regarding the last call and the final status for core EIPs. So I'm proposing this new structure if we can get some feedback on that.
So,
which new structure?
This was
There it is.
the GitHub issue in the comment, right?
Yes, I just shared the link.
Perfect. Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry, I was reading this comment wrong. This diagram that you put into the comment is the proposed changes, not the current state, right?
Right. So in the diagram below, if we see that I'm proposing that consider for inclusion could be EIP status could be draft till review, and DevNet phase that we consider, the EIP status has to be review only. And when it goes to mainnet phase, the first part should be reviewed to last call. And as Micah was suggesting, that we should not put final status on any core EIP unless it is deployed on the mainnet. So if it is on mainnet, then only we provide the status of final. So this is the proposal.
I thought we got rid of final or changed the definition to separate the upgrade process from the technical process.
I think the one. Sorry, go ahead.
Final still exists. I think it's no longer special for core EIPs.
Right.
Got
so
it.
The only
That's
status that we got rid of was accepted.
That's right. I got those confused. Okay, that sounds good.
So how I think it'll work out is people will wait to change their EIP to final if it's a core EIP until after it's deployed. So it'll probably stay in review up until they get confirmation. All right, this is the one that we're going to go with.
Got it. Okay, that sounds good.
I believe Pooja is suggesting that it goes into last call once we hit public test nets, like once we decide the fork blocks, basically, the EIPs for that upcoming fork all go into last call.
That seems a little bit weird because then if there are changes during last call, then we'll have to switch client stuff for the fork blocks that have been created, right?
Yes. By the time you get there, you should not have any changes. Like if you have changes in last call, it means you did not do a good job of reaching out to reviewers ahead of time.
So
like it means you failed earlier.
So that should be in DevNet phase, because if it's in mainnet phase, it's already so late in the process, then we don't want things getting. I mean, a lot of people wait until last call to actually like do any final reviews, and people put it off. So if they're doing that already, then waiting until the mainnet phase seems counterintuitive.
I think people did that because we did not have a review phase. We only had draft, last call, final, basically. And so there was no phase where the author asserted, I'm done. It's now time for people to look at this before it goes live. There was just like, I'm working on this, and then it's going live in 2 weeks. Like that was the only step previously. We now added the review step, which is, so we now have, I'm working on this, and then I'm done working on this, or at least I think I am. I need feedback. And then I personally think of last call as, I'm done with this. I've received feedback. I've iterated. Everybody thinks this is good. This is your last chance to speak up, like to stop the ship. Like the ship's already taken off. If you want, this is the last chance to stop it, kind of thing.
Making it a habit for people to be able to stop the ship in a mainnet phase just seems like the same problems we're facing today. Well,
so the stop the ship would be like a security vulnerability. Like in my opinion, once you go into last call, it should really, your especially core APs, should really be done. Like this should be like, for lack of a better word, it is the last call. Like it is, everything is done. Like there's no more changes. Like this is the last chance for anyone to speak up. Like speak up or forever hold your peace sort of situation.
I think that
which to me aligns with the fork block decision.
We have a precedent for ERCs that people can do radical changes during last call because it's happened.
Yes, ERCs are terrible and we shouldn't be a part of the ERC process.
So the thing is, because well, ideally that shouldn't be the case, but right now I feel like unless we really push people to change their definition of last call for both ERCs and core EIPs, we're going to run into this problem because right now as the definition in EIP 1 stands, it sounds like you can change it during last call.
Yes, you can change it technically.
And there's not like a thing that basically there's nothing in the definition that encourages you to only do security changes.
Is this from your point of view, is this a just kind of historical thing where people are used to last call meaning something that perhaps isn't what we intended, but it's what it is? Or is your argument more that EIPs should be final before fork blocks?
I think EIPs should be, Yeah, that's weird because we don't have I don't want to add another status in between there necessarily because that's adding too many statuses. But yes, I agree that I think the original idea for last call, because Nick Johnson put it in. So a lot of people are going off of his definition, which is during last call, if there's anyone who has objections, they can raise those objections. And there's not any implication that it has to be a security objection.
Yes, I agree with that. I suspect Nick, if Nick put this in, he was modeling it off of like IETF and RFCs and all those. And those ones, by the time they hit their last phase, like there's almost never any changes. When there is, it's really small. Like it's like a minor tweak, like a constant kind of thing. The problem is with Ethereum EIPs, we are not nearly as good as those people at making specs, and so by the time we get to last call, like you said, there are a lot of people who haven't even bothered looking yet. Whereas if you look at, say, W3C, when JavaScript hits their last phase, like a JavaScript change or a browser change gets to the last phase, like there's really no opportunity to make any significant changes at that point. Like it's already gone through years of iteration and it's implemented in every browser and like it's all but done. And that last phase is basically, we're pretty confident this is it. Like you better have a really good reason to change it, kind of thing.
Yeah,
and that definitely doesn't align with the process.
Yeah, I'd love for it to mean that. I think that people aren't going to use it that way. I think people are going to not know if review means it's review day 1 or review day 365.
Is there a solution to get us long-term to a place where we actually do have a process that more closely aligns with other standards organizations?
Or not calling it last call.
So I have a question.
Sure.
Say we do put last call for dev net, and then we find something in the dev testnet that should be worth editing the EIP. Like at that point, like if we put in the last call and it was found 3 weeks after instead of 2 weeks after, like would it be messing up the process to have an EIP that's final, but we found something in the dev testnet that we should update the EIP?
So for last calls, the review end period, for the way I've been treating it, is not optional, but it's like minimum review. So like the earliest this thing will be merged is 2 weeks later, or whatever date the person puts in. However, it does not have to go to final exactly at the end of the review period, specifically for core EIPs, because it goes final for the exact reason you said. It does not go to final until mainnet launch in case there's a last minute change, like a bug popped up in public testnets, for example.
Oh, so one way to fix this then is to have final not mean it's in mainnet, because there are some things that don't
So final
require,
doesn't mean mainnet.
So final won't mean mainnet because it won't require a hard fork.
Yeah, so final means that you can't change the EIP. Because remember, the EIP process is uncorrelated with, from the point of view of the EIP process, it's uncorrelated with the hard fork coordination process. So once your EIP is in final, you cannot change it. Like if you want to change it, you create a new EIP with a new number, and maybe it's copy and paste with just a minor tune, but it's a new thing. Like you don't get the number anymore. So if 1559 was final and we need to change a constant, you need to create a new EIP to change that constant. It makes the most sense for core EIPs to wait until they're on mainnet before they go into that phase, because it would suck to have an EIP go final and then you're not able to change it because it's already done. Basically, we're trying to avoid, I don't know if you guys all remember this, but the KEC Act 256 versus SHA-3 situation, where KEC Act 256 was standardized and everybody thought it was done, but it wasn't actually final in terms of standards organizations, like whoever does the crypto standards. And then Ethereum was like, okay, we're using SHA-3, and we launched. And then like at the very last minute, the crypto organization, I forget what they're called, they're like, oh, we actually want to change this one little like thing. Like it was a tiny change, but it is totally incompatible with the SHA-3 that Ethereum launched with. And so now we have KEC Act 256, which is not even a standard. It's just a thing that everybody thought was going to be the SHA-3 standard and didn't actually end up being the SHA-3 standard. And so we want to avoid that situation. And so one way to do that is to make it so things aren't final until they're live. So we can make those last minute changes and not have to worry about running into collisions and all that.
But if we do it the way we're currently doing it, we won't be able to make those last minute changes without breaking test nets along the way or having to rush client releases. So although like the idea is right, like basically the intention is good, I think in practice, it's going to be hard to break old habits this quickly.
So yeah, so I can appreciate that. And so that's why I was asking kind of, are people disagreeing with the ideal long-term process, or is the fear that given Ethereum's history and people's historic behavior, we're worried that the current process will not equal the process we want? And it sounds like the latter.
It is the latter mostly. There are some ways to tweak this to correct that, I think. One of them being to rename last call. So basically, because it's been abused so much, just rename last call, but then have the real definition be what it is, like what you've described, which is very few changes except for security vulnerabilities during the last call phase. But then that doesn't solve the problem of the review status being an indeterminate amount of time.
Is that really an issue? Just review not being
For people who
limited
want to
to time?
review at the last minute, people look at, so there are some people who look at the RSS feed for last call, and that's when they start to look at an EIP.
I think
We
the
know
solution
that.
here is just having your RSS feed for review instead of one for a last call.
Do we know if there's more than one person that uses the RSS feed?
Yes, I know
Okay.
two. So that
Okay.
could mean that there are more than two. So I don't know.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I just was wondering like if we're optimizing for the right crowd.
Well, yeah, I guess you're right. Like, because
I honestly don't know. Maybe there's thousands of people that subscribe to this RSS feed. I know of one.
It's just the statuses is the thing. Like the status does indicate like people rushing to review it, and then they start to disagree with it, even though they're not looking. Because who's looking for a security vulnerability in the last 14 days? I don't think many people are.
Yeah, so I think the real problem here is that, in my experience, the vast majority of EIPs get a grand total of 1 to 2 people looking at it right up until a bunch of people need to implement it, and then you have 1,000 people looking at it. And so when 1,000 people start looking at it in the last call phase, then you get a lot of feedback in the last call phase. If you somehow get a lot of people looking at it in the review phase, like with 1559, then you get a lot of feedback in the review phase. Like actually 1559 got the feedback in the draft phase. And
Yeah.
so like I feel like we have these statuses that are meant to give people information, but I don't feel like they're particularly functional in achieving that goal. Like people are not looking at them.
I would lean toward this to help with the fact that to basically stick with somewhat of the status quo, but to try to also push best practices would be to keep last call's definition as is pretty much, because it doesn't include only security vulnerabilities right now, and move it to DevNet phase. And then public testnet doesn't include an EIP status beyond well, then but then that leaves public testnet to not have an EIP status. That's the problem, I guess. Yeah.
One more thing I would like to add here is generally the definition of last call says that it is for 14 days. So one correction there would be minimum of 14 days would be good. But if we want to keep it in last call for over a month, because when it is on testnet, we believe it is for 4 weeks at least. So I am not very sure that we should put the last call status in DevNet phase.
Yes.
I would be fine with getting rid of that 14-day thing. I've never really liked it personally.
Okay. That would be okay. But the thing is, I think the other thing that's messing me up here that makes it harder to find a solution is the fact that this definition for last call is the same across ERCs and core EIPs. And if that wasn't the case, then things would be easier.
We can just kick ERCs out of the EIPs repository. That would solve a lot of problems. And a lot of my problems too.
if we can get, if we start paying for editors, I'd be okay with that plan. And I actually talked to a project I can't name who said that once they have enough funding, they want to give money for EIP editors. So that's kind of part of another piece of this update, I think.
They don't happen to be launching a food token of some sort, do they?
Not quite, no.
No, that's unfortunate. That would mean they actually have money.
Yeah. Anyways, so I think I need to think about this more personally. So if we don't make a decision today, I'd be happy with that. But to think about this more.
Yeah, sure. And I see there are some comments as well in the chat. So I'm also fine with not making any decision. I just wanted to bring it to attention, like, we had this discussion that we are not following the process, or people are not aware of the process, or there are some changes that we should be bringing to the process. So just wanted to share it.
Yeah, that sounds okay. I have it on my to-do list to make a comment on that issue in the next week.
Sure. I will keep
You sound really quiet, Pooja.
Yeah, it sounds like you're far away from the mic.
I'm so sorry about that.
There you go.
Okay, so I'm going to keep this item on the agenda for the next meeting as well.
Thanks.
If I could just say one more thing on that.
Yeah, sure, please.
I think a lot of people don't understand the latest EIP process, and I think that was incredibly clear with 2315. A lot of people still thought that the status of the EIP kind of meant how far along it was in the governance process, and people were like, "Oh, 2315 was still in draft." We thought it was, we didn't realize it was going into a hard fork, and that's maybe not the best argument in the world. There's probably a lot of documentation that it was going into a hard fork, but I think that having those things separated caused a lot of confusion for people who don't reasonably closely follow all core devs.
Yeah, I do. I'm not a hard fork coordinator, so it's not out of my purview. But I do support the hard fork coordination process requiring that if you want an EIP included, it's got to be in the right phase. Like, you can't include draft EIPs in upcoming hard fork.
I just don't understand what is the benefit of separating these two processes? Because for core EIPs, we're kind of saying that they have to be these things to go into these phases, and it's like we've separated two processes, but we're still making them forced together.
I think so 2 reasons. One, that it's a unidirectional connection instead of a bidirectional. So the hard fork coordination process points at EIPs, but EIPs do not point back. And so the EIP process can exist entirely without knowing the hard fork coordination process. And that is valuable because of politics. The EIP process being purely technical allows us to move forward and ignore politics. And anytime someone brings them up, we can tell them, go away, go to the hard fork coordination process where politics are handled. And that is very valuable, especially given that we are already massively understaffed to actually do anything with EIPs. And being able to tell people this is not the right place for governance discussion is very valuable.
I just don't, I really don't see how this is that different from what, because in my mind, the only difference would be that if you want to move to a final state, or we add a new state that says it's going into a hard fork, a new status, to me the only difference in what we're doing is that they need to provide a link to an all core devs decision that says, this is going into a hard fork, and then as an editor we say, okay, yep, that checks out, I looked at that link, it's going to a hard fork, I'll update the status. And to me that just makes everybody's life easier, it doesn't make our lives harder.
So we ran into this a couple of times with EIPs in the past, I believe, where the governance debate ends up spilling over into the EIP process and being very distracting for the EIP editors. And the reason for that is because at some point, someone updates an EIP and it now says, going into hard fork X, going into Berlin, going into London, whatever. And as soon as that happens, everybody shows up in the EIP repo and starts commenting and starts submitting pull requests to remove that, etc. When that is handled elsewhere, it makes those people go elsewhere when they want to do their brigading and their harassing and haranguing. And so James can deal with that until he quits and hands it over to Tim, who can deal with that until he quits and hands it over to someone else. And the editors, hopefully, can stick around and not be driven away by the massive brigading and problems that people cause when they see that stuff. Like by having a clearly separate spot for them to go to that's not here, like not here, not these people. Don't distract these people. They're doing real work. Go distract those people whose job it is to deal with that problem. And it's by keeping it very clearly separated, it makes it easier to kind of draw a line in the sand and say, no, that goes over there. Whereas if the two are intertwined, then it's much harder to kind of stand up and say, this is not the right place, because they're like, well, it says right there, it's going into Berlin. So clearly this is a place I need to change that. I need to submit a pull request to update the CIP that is not going to Berlin or whatever. That's my reasoning. I really like having the shield, basically. So James is able to be a shield for the EIP process because we have this very clear bucket of responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really experienced that, so you know, obviously my take is going to be different, but I can understand how that is frustrating as an editor. I think, you know, I mean, I'll just say my two last points. I think that one, you know, if we design the process in the right way, I feel like we can use the process as a shield still. I think that we should be able to say, this isn't the place to discuss this. We don't choose what goes into hard forks. We just, you know, if an all core devs decision says that the status gets updated, we update the status. That's it. Go argue about that in all core devs, wherever else. I don't see why that's that different than just saying this isn't discussed here, because it basically still isn't. And then, you know, the other thing is that I feel like we're optimizing for, you know, the 5% of EIPs that have a lot of issues. And by optimizing for those EIPs that have, you know, issues and a lot of people fighting for them, we are really degrading the experience for everyone in the community and for the other 95% of EIPs, because a lot of people just want to go and see, you know, want to read about an EIP, want to know what its status is, and they want to do it all from a single page. And it's just incredibly frustrating to like look in EIP and not know how far along in the governance process it is from its site. That's why I think I said from the very beginning that at minimum we should also include as a courtesy what the like hard fork status of an EIP is, even if those things are still separate, the specification and everything.
So my opinion on the last point you made there is that I think the real issue here is that people are using the EIP as the center point, and I don't feel like it should be. I feel like the EIP should be a technical detail, not the the center point. And unfortunately, this is not how things have been handled historically at all. Like this is very much not how things are actually done. But I do think that it'd be great if instead of when someone wants to say like, what is this new fee change? They don't go look up or get linked to EIP 1559. They get linked to that resources page that Tim put up. It has links to some blog posts. It has links to the Berlin hard fork. It has links. It has description of the EIP designed for certain audiences. Like it's not just the technical specification. I feel the vast majority of people, the technical specification is not the right place for them to start learning about an EIP or talking about an EIP or anything like that. Like it's one of those things where there's 10 people who actually read the RFC for email addresses, but no one goes to the email RFC to learn about email or to learn about how to send an email or how to use email or anything like that. Like there's like probably a few hundred people in the world who have ever actually read that RFC front to back. I would like it if we can get there, but maybe I'm being overly optimistic. That's not a realistic goal.
I mean, I totally understand that, and I definitely agree that that's probably the long-term goal. I just don't think that we are close to that. I think that the number of people who are really involved in this process are still, it's so ingrained that if you are working at a low level of Ethereum, you're going to go look at the EIP repository to understand changes. And we just don't have the resources to have every single change have a resource page and have write-ups and all of these things. Like it's we're still a lot smaller than
that's a very good point.
Did it really well, and it's just a lot to ask for every single EIP to have that many resources. So that's why I feel like in the short to medium term we should keep things small.
That's a fair and compelling.
The best, yeah.
That's a fair and compelling argument. You are right. Like, W3C and IETF, they've got lots of resources when they want to, like when there's a browser change, for example, there's a spec for it. And, there's like 10 people who actually read that spec, but it's, listed on caniuse.com and 400 other web pages, and people blog about it. And like, there's almost no one goes to the specs repo to learn about upcoming changes to the browser APIs. But you're totally right. It's because they have, hundreds of people working on every single change, not two. And so maybe you're right. Maybe the issue here is just we don't have the funding or the resources to actually achieve a goal, and as a result, we're trying to achieve an unachievable goal, which just puts us in an even worse place if we didn't even bother trying.
I feel like it's going to happen naturally because, I mean, if you just look at how EIPs have changed over the last four years or so, you look at EIP 7 or whatever delegate call is, and it's, 50 lines, and it's just, there's just nothing there. And now, we're looking at some of these later ones like 3074, it's a, really beefy EIP. And if that would have been proposed in 2015, it would have been just like, oh, Vitalk said this was a good idea. Let's just throw a couple lines down, and then we'll just talk about it on IRC or Gitter, how to implement it. And, in 5 more years, I'm guessing that maybe every EIP will have a 1559 style resource guide and all that stuff. Maybe it'll be 8 or 10 years, I'm not sure, but I think that'll happen naturally.
I'll think on what your argument here. It's very convincing, the smaller resource pool.
Okay, so one last question I think I may have on this topic before we move on. Although I know this is not an all-core dev meeting and this is not like we are discussing the Berlin upgrade here, but it's a question to EIP editors. Right now, all the proposals of Berlin are on testnet. And as far as I know, there is only one EIP out of 4, which is actually in last call, and rest all are in review. Is it okay to ask the author to change it to the last call at this point of time?
I'd be fine with the first one. And if they don't want to, I'm also okay with that.
Okay.
It might help if we, like you said, edit EIP1. Someone submitted a PR to EIP1 that just gets rid of that, makes it more clear that the 14 days is a minimum, not a hard requirement. And then maybe in the future we can talk about just removing the review end period and just have it implicit.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm gonna.
I think that's what the pushback you'll get is the 14 days. Like people will be like, oh, we don't know if it's going to release in 14 days.
Okay, so I'm gonna bring it back on the agenda next in the next meeting as well.
If we're moving on to the next topic, are we done with this one?
I'd suppose so, if everybody.
Since Hudson has to leave in a few minutes, do you guys mind if I interject a quick discussion item that I forgot to put on the agenda?
Yeah, sure, please go ahead.
So, for reasons that I don't fully understand, the burden of reviewing EIPs has increased. It is now to the point where I am unable to keep up while also continuing to sleep every night. And so I think starting probably this week, I'm going to stop reviewing ERCs just because I need to drop something. And it's either drop ERCs, drop sleep, or drop eating. And I've decided ERCs, they drew the short straw. So either someone else needs to pick up reviewing ERCs, or we just need to accept that we're going to go back into the state we used to be in, where EIPs are sitting waiting for a reviewer for months to years, unless someone has a very novel solution.
I heard that people want to remove them from the EIP repository.
I've heard that too.
I think while we find a solution, if it goes back to where it was before, where we're not like completely up to date on it and we have a lag behind, that's not the worst thing in the world, because that's kind of what has to happen. But we should work towards recruiting more editors. I still haven't cracked that code. So yeah.
I'll definitely step
Do we
up
want-
and keep trying to get those things reviewed. I feel like usually every week or two, I try and carve out a few hours to really go through stuff. It's just generally there aren't things left over because Micah reviews everything within about 30 minutes of it being posted.
Good
I
job,
promise to stop doing that.
I mean, yeah, if there's open stuff, I usually will get to them after a week or so. So I don't think we're gonna get back to the place where it's months and months without reviews, but I'm definitely a lot more open to removing ERCs from the EIP repository. It's probably not something we can decide right now, but I know that in the past I've been against it, and I think that I don't know if it's just Micah's really getting in my head and he's starting to control my thoughts, but it's really grown on me over the last 6 months.
I've been figured out.
I think it's fine that ERCs are in the EIP repo.
I haven't gotten into Edson's head yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that just like really is like pushed me over the edge is that they're so different than they're so different than core EIPs, and it's just so weird to have the two like intermingled. So I would be very okay with having an ERC repository.
I think the skill set for reviewing ERCs is very different than EIPs. I happen to have both just because of my history. I came up through the dev side and then moved over to core dev sort of side later. But I can definitely, I know people who would be very good at reviewing ERCs and terrible at reviewing EIPs. And I also know people who are very good at reviewing EIPs, and I would not want them reviewing ERCs.
So should we recruit before separating or separate then recruit if we decide to do that? Theoretically, not that we're making a decision today. Okay.
I would separate then recruit, just for the reason I just said. Like the skill set is so different that you're going to want to look for different people, and it's much harder to recruit for the core EIPs. Like the technical knowledge you needs to be really deep.
That's true. Okay. We need to figure out how hard it would be to separate and like propose something before we decide, I think.
I think the biggest issue is going to be that we're going to destroy every permalink to the GitHub repo for ERCs.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
We could,
Well, so in theory, people should not be linking to the GitHub repo. They should be linking to EIPs, Ethereum.org. Like we've been telling this for a while. Maybe we just say, hey, we told you to link to the other place. Not my fault you linked to the wrong one. But I'm willing to be a dick like that.
What we could do is we could just replace every ERC with, like we did, I think the ERC20 token was named differently, and then we've got a placeholder there. We could do that for every ERC and keep that for 3 to 5 years. And I don't think that would really impose much of an issue because who's actually going through that list of files? Not many people.
It's more the discussion links, but we wouldn't be deleting PRs or issues, would we?
No.
No. We actually don't have the ability to do that.
Got it. Okay. Sounds good. I got to jump off. I'll think about that part more. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. That's it, Johnny.
Oh, Pooja, Alita's here. Did you want to go back to the bot?
Yeah.
One last thing on that real quick. I don't know, is theoretically, if we did want to do that, does anyone have like a theoretical path to, making that, like who needs to agree to that to make something like that happen?
The benevolent dictator of EIPs.
So we're going to do it tomorrow then.
Yeah, I also don't know. So the people who actually look at ERCs are me and in theory other EIP editors. So pretty few and far between, as you know. And then there are the authors of those ERCs themselves. And then once the ERCs get popular, they're the people who are looking at them to implement. Those are 3 people I have seen show up in the EIP's repo related to ERCs, or the 3 types of people.
I mean, I have been like looking at it recently, just only for one thing, if there is a status review or they are trying to skip it right from draft to last call. And that's my only comment for any ERC that I have looked into so far. Maybe this is something that we could like, bring it on the next call and as an item itself, like, do we want to separate these EIP and ERC if people are open to discuss that?
Sure.
Okay.
Just so people can chew on it, the reason I want them separated and not just like, say, Micah reviews core EIPs and someone else reviews ERCs, is that GitHub subscriptions, I subscribe to the entire EIP's repository, which means I get an email notification for everything. And right now that is about half ERCs. And it'd be nice if I could not subscribe to the ERC half. And I don't believe there's an easy way to do that without splitting it out into a separate repository.
I think that's a general argument for a lot of issues that we have with, governance, is that a lot of people don't want to contribute because the noise is so loud. But with them separated, I think that there's just a lot less happening in terms of core EIPs, and so that may allow a larger number of people to actually review everything that comes through because they feel comfortable doing that. And then maybe people who want to look at ERCs will feel comfortable because this is like an ERC specific. It's a little more friendly. They don't have to deal with, the scary core devs.
Yeah, it's a very good point.
Okay, in the essence of time, let's move on to quickly go over a few other items, and I will try to add that on the, not try, I will definitely add that on the agenda next time to have a proper discussion on this topic, separation of EIP and ERC. And yeah, coming back to Alita's item, I think we have discussed it briefly. I want to just give a chance to go ahead with the next items listed for today. And if we have some time, we'll come back to item number 1 again to see if there are any progress to be reported. So the next item on the agenda is a progress on canonical source for EIPs. I believe Brent has something to talk about it.
Yeah, the meeting's way long, so I just want to mention that we've forked the repository, and I'm working with one of our part-time engineers to figure out the bot system that makes eips.ethereum.org so we can make a mirror of that site. Once we've got that running, we're going to start making changes, the changes we're proposing, and I'm proposing those in the doc. So just wanted to let everyone know I'm pushing in that direction. That's the progress we've made. So that's all I need to mention today. We'll talk about it later.
Did you have a specific question? Because you were mentioning something earlier.
Well, I just need to get more educated about how the robot system and the EIP or the EIP GitHub repository works, what robots are involved in. But I can do that on my own time with my part-time engineer and then do that. So we don't have time in meeting here.
I was just going to say that, yeah, it is mostly Jekyll. So Jekyll will basically compile the EIPs into like static website files, and then
yeah, I've got my part-time engineer and I are looking into that. We're figuring that Jekyll stuff out. So we'll get there. Just take it a bit. So, but thanks for the support. Yeah, we need. Yeah, if anyone has any help or. But anyway, yeah, we're working on it. So thanks.
Thank you, Brent, for that. So coming back to item number 1, which was on the progress on EIP GitHub repo. Now that Alita have joined, Alita, if you have anything to update on that, and we know that this is already in a pull request on EIP GitHub for editors to review. Do you want to add anything on that?
No, not really. I think that pretty much covers it. It's in review. Yeah.
Can you ping me once I noticed you're making a bunch of changes, and so I kind of stopped checking back. Can you just mention me on that once you're to a point where you think you're done with all your next round of changes and I can review it again?
Yeah, so actually that is one thing that I added you. Did you want tests? I wasn't really clear.
I mean, I always want tests, but I also have been an engineer long enough to know how much of a time sink that can be. And so the question is it worth the time? And I don't have a good answer to that one. In your opinion, how easy is it to test GitHub Actions? This is one of those things where you're gonna have to spend like 2 weeks just figuring out how to test a GitHub action, like in an automated fashion? Or is it something like, oh, you don't know how to do that?
So I can build like a custom system that'll just do it like a mock, basically, which is what Jest is for anyway. And what that means is basically like just creating like some basic, not necessarily perfect reproduction of a PR just to test certain behaviors. The biggest thing is like there are a lot of edge cases to do. So like I mean, there are bugs with the current bot, like a lot of them, I think. So like,
Yep, like it only runs half the time.
yeah. Well, wait. Well, but anyway, like there are a lot of things that are wrong with it. Which admittedly, you know, writing tests would be a really great opportunity to then like test and fix those edge cases. But also, the bot seems like a perfect candidate for tests, like to require tests, because no one's going to notice when something's going wrong. But anyways, like I would say it will take me about 1 to 2 weeks to get like a solid baseline of tests going. So if you all are okay with that, then like I think it's fine and I can do it.
So my feeling that 1 to 2 weeks aligns kind of with where my gut was, just looking over your shoulder. That's of the order of magnitude. This is almost a question of, should you test your test suite? Because the bot is effectively just kind of a test runner that is supposed to like an automated CI process, and spending 1 to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, you can definitely test your tests. It's just a question of, is it worth the time? Like, would that time be better spent making the bot actually do better? Like making it, do more things. Like we have a list of things we'd rather have the bot do. Like if you have 1 to 2 weeks of engineering time, we can either sync it on making sure that the bot is robust, or we can sync it on making the bot more feature rich. And I'm on the fence as to which is more valuable.
I would like to see, just a couple, really basic tests of the EIP, checking functionality, just to make sure that, okay, for these simple cases, this makes sense. Did they change the status to review? If so, then that needs an EIP editor. I don't know what the control flow exactly is, but just, a handful of tests. I don't expect every edge case to be tested, but just a few sanity checks I think would be valuable. And then having the structure for, writing other tests in the future would be nice.
Okay. That makes sense as a first go. And then, obviously, like I'm happy to continue work on it as well if you all wanted to keep me on with that. But like in regards to like building out tests versus well, first off, so for this PR, it would make sense to build out the infrastructure for tests, not necessarily the tests themselves, and I could get that done in like pretty quickly. But anyways, like I think that the bot itself really needs like very comprehensive tests, just because like it's going to be really hard to build out things when like the bot needs to be on point, otherwise it's kind of like going to cause problems, right? Because like if we're just like auto merging things because of some bug, then that's going to mess up the repo. So I think that it would be better to be sure than to have problems with this sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I forgot that this particular bot, a failure in the bot results in bad things happening. Like it's It's not just like, oh, the bot didn't help us, human can step in. This is, oh, the bot actually made things worse. That pushes me more towards the yes, we should test more stuff.
And then also, when it comes to like the actual code itself, like for some reason it's pretty. I mean, I think it's because it was porting from Python or something. Like the logic was pretty tangled, so there is still some work to do as well, like to make it expandable. Because right now you can expand it, but like it's just going to cause problems. But anyway.
Sure. Getting the infrastructure up in a place that the rest of us can iterate on, I think, is a very valuable first step. Like just
so you're talking about creating a mirror of EIP repository on a server, right? And that's exactly what we're building. So yeah, we could do all that stuff on this repository that I'm working on. And we're going to be tweaking getting the Jekyll script and everything running on a server. And that would be, it seems like to me, that'd be a perfect place for Alita to run her tests and develop testing and make sure everything runs on this a snap or fork of the EIP repository. Then and we can keep updating that fork and run the scripts and develop tests and stuff like that. But anyway, yeah, I'd like to get our part-time engineer involved and help with some of that. We can do that.
So we don't need a server or anything for these tests. They are straightforward and well-defined for GitHub Actions, so it can be done in a single repo. So yeah, it wouldn't really be pertinent.
But is it going to be taking action on live data and stuff like that?
I'm not totally sure what that means, but with the current behavior, we don't need any. It doesn't need anything else, no.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm convinced. I'm with Lake Client. It's just getting the test infrastructure up at least, and then a few sanity checks on the most egregious things, like the things that we definitely want to make sure get blocked, such as is one of the authors the pull request author, or did they approve it? Like that's kind of the one thing that it does good. And is it not in the wrong status? Like if we can get those two things tested, at least on the surface, that would go a long way, I think, and satisfy me.
Okay, that's achievable. I'll let you know when it's done.
Thank you.
That being said, do we want to? So the other option is, no, never mind. I guess we can't merge this until we're ready to put it live, right?
I mean, you could always just disable the action, so you can merge it and then disable it.
Is it possible to manually run the action while it's disabled like that?
No, because it's triggered based off the pull request itself.
Is there a way,
I think
does GitHub Action support manual triggers? Like we started out as a manual trigger, just
I would
so
have to
we can.
investigate, because I'm not sure about how to do that.
So if that's possible, if there's a manual trigger, and I want to say there is, I think I saw a repo that had a manual trigger GitHub Action. If there's a manual trigger, then we could merge it and then use it manually when the current merge bot fails, which is pretty often, because when it fails, I'm currently closing the EIP and then reopening it. If instead I could just go and say, oh, I'll try Alita's bot and click the button there, I'm already sitting there watching it. And so if it does something wrong, I'll be there to catch it and fix it. And so that might be a nice way to get kind of test in production, so to speak.
Theoretically, there's definitely ways where you can tag a bot and give it a command. I know Boars has a lot of functionality like that, where you can tag Boars and say, okay, once the other people on this approve, go ahead and merge it. I don't know how hard it is to implement like a really simple some functionality really simply, but it can be done.
Kind of because we're short on time, I wanted to hop on one other thing. Did you all want me to go out and build that like the bot and do a separate repo? And I can just do it. Like I can set it up, and then like Hudson or whoever has permissions can I can just give over control or something like that.
I'm on the fence. Like client half convinced me. The plus side of having it in the EIP's repo is that it's right there, and the same people who have write access to the EIP's repo would have write access to the bot. So when we, the people who have write access to that repo, notice it doing something wrong, or we want to make a quick patch, we know we have permissions. And so if we add new editors, those editors will automatically get the correct access rights. Having it in a separate repo, though, is just from like a modularity and keeping separation of concerns. That does make more sense in that regard. I'm on the fence. If other people have really strong problems, this is definitely not a hill I want to die on either side.
I feel pretty strong that it should be in its own repo. I think it's, you know, several thousand lines of code, and I don't really want to mix a bunch of PRs between the two things.
I agree with Light Client. In addition to that, it'll make it a lot easier to do CLI for the bot itself.
Yeah, okay, I'm convinced. Using my own argument against me, that was smart. I just argued before earlier that we should separate ERCs and EIPs so people could subscribe more specifically, and having EIP bot PRs go to the same place that EIP PRs go would not help with that. So yeah, let's get it out. Move it separate repo.
And then, did you want me to do it, or were you waiting for someone else? I forget. I know who it was, but I'm forgetting his name.
James is the one who has the ability to create a new repo in the Ethereum organization, which ideally is where this would live. In the meantime, if you just want to put it in one of your own repos, it's pretty trivial to move it over once we actually do get a more permanent location. We'll just have to update a couple links. So I would say if you want to split it out into a separate repo just under your username in GitHub, we can use that for now. And then once James can create an Ethereum/EIP bot repo, then we can move it there. That'd be what I propose.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you, Alita, Micah, and Lightfriend. So with this discussion, it seems like we are going to see some more actions, and we would want to keep this in the next meeting item as well. So we'll wait for your progress there. I think we are over time. I wanted to quickly cover on the EIP editors onboarding thing. We just have, tried to answer most of the questions on the EIP Discord itself. But if you could not get answer, like I have created this new role in the ECH Discord as EIP editors aspirants. And if you are not there, you want to be on part of there. If you have any further questions, please reach out to us. Like you can DM to any of the members of the Ethereum cat herders, or post your questions directly in the general section of the ECH Discord. That was the last item on the agenda. Thank you everyone for joining us today. See you all in next 2 weeks on March 24th.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pooja, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.